1, 2, 3. Hai, hey, Post-Credit Faiz. Quick shout out kepada yang donate untuk episod ini, iaitu Liz Sekejap aku tengok. Iaitu Liz Naziri, Alif Haikal dan Nur Hazimah dan juga Ajim. Terima kasih sebab korang support untuk episod ni. Kalau korang nak jadi donor, link dekat bawah. Dan kembali kepada episod. Hello, hi, apa khabar? Setelah lama aku break for like a few months, so we are back with the podcast JeninBercerita, and for this season gonna focus on the art scene. Before I introduce our guest, like a quick shout out to our venue sponsor, Temu House. Jadi kalau korang ada like a idea to propose, just come here. Orang-orang kat sini sangatlah open. You can do like any kind of arts, music. I mean like there used to be screening here, right? It's very open. So for this year, aku nak cuba sustain the podcast by making merch. Jadi making merch and donation. Jadi kalau korang nak support that way, boleh tengok link dekat atas ni. Aku harapkan aku edit betul. So let's go to the episode. So Sharmin, introduce yourself first.
Hi, I'm Sharmin Parameswaran, and I think you can see we're in the space Temu House, and I basically manage the arts and arts programming that is within Temu House. Temu House, we call it an art space, which we also have events here, other events, such as F&B events or community events. So and that's basically what I do part-time, I would say.
So before we go into detail of Temu House, let's kenal dulu Sharmin. So first, based on my reading online for this episode, your father was a collector, right?
Yes,
a collector.
Yes, he was, yeah.
And even though he was a collector, you didn't like attract to art when you were little.
Yeah.
So that was strange to me because my background, I didn't have that. So I didn't have that exposure at first. So I thought that itu yang membuatkan I lambat untuk minat seni. So bila baca you, the opposite, I was like, oh, interesting. So can you share me about that?
Yeah, I think my father was a collector, an art collector, and yes, I did grow up within the I would say art industry in that sense, But I think as a kid, when he used to take me to go to art galleries and go to meet a lot of artists, I was still a child. I would say, maybe a lot of it was between the ages of 7 to about 10, and we would go to galleries and he would spend hours, right? Hours in the gallery, National Gallery. And when we go and visit artists, he would again spend hours talking to them. Right, but as a child, your attention span is only that short, right? So you would go in, you look at a few visuals. After that, you're like, okay, Pa, is it time to go? Is it time to go? Even with the artists, when they would be talking about art or concepts, and as a kid, you won't understand, right? I remember, we used to visit this artist called Pan Chun-gi, who was based in Penang quite a bit, and he would get into long conversations with I called him Uncle Tan, right? And I used to entertain myself by chasing Uncle Tan's cats around the house. So it wasn't, after a while, I started dreading going on these art trips with him, whether it was to the galleries or to visit artists, and my association of art was long hours, where I will be bored as a kid. Yeah, so I think that's where, as soon as I came of age and when I didn't have to follow him, then I would say no, right? So that, and then after that, I just sort of didn't go back to it, because then when I went to study, I studied, I'm actually an accounting graduate.
I see.
Right, so that
the total opposite.
Total opposite, but enough to know after 2 years of accounting, I was just like, no, this is so not me. But not knowing what else was there, So I think after a while only, then I realized that, that I do enjoy art. I do enjoy art expressions, because when I say art, I don't only say visual art, okay. Right? I think my first, I would say, love has always started with reading. I used to read a lot. right? Whether it's books, poetry, things like that. I love music.
So literature was the gateway for you.
Literature, I love music. I love music. Taylor Swift, huge fan. Right? Swiftie. I mean, yeah. And also theatre. And then only arts came. So I think as long I was already open to a lot of art formats in that sense, right?
So during those early years, memang your father always ajak lah. So he tried to letakkan benih-benih sikit in the interest in art.
I don't think he consciously tried to, you say, plant the seed or put the benih. I don't think he did. I think he was just doing what he wanted to do, right? So for example, I go back to Penang. When we used to go to Penang, sorry, I backtrack a bit. My dad was a diplomat. Right, I didn't stay with him. I stayed in KL, right? So he used to travel quite a bit. So when he did come back to KL, he would always say, "Okay, let's take a trip to Penang," because he wanted to go and visit all the artists. Right? And I would say, no, I don't want, right? But then he says, no, you come first and we will go and do your favorite lah. So he will say, we go to the snake temple, we go to the butterfly farm and things like that. So I go with him, but after a certain time, he says, okay, time to go and visit artists. Right? So he would still take me to Penang, but I think he already would, in his mind, go and see art, and I would follow him because, we would spend holidays together in that sense, right? So whether he consciously tried to plant the benih, possibly, I don't know, right? Yeah. Maybe he did. Yeah, maybe.
How do you enter the scene? Seeing that you didn't study it?
Yeah. This was in 2012, right? I think by that time, my dad had, we were both finally in KL together, right? Because he was always traveling, he was always going overseas and staying overseas. This was in Publica, and so my dad and I were in Publica, and we had, we had a mutual friend, Nani Kaha, right? And she was always asking my dad, wait, what are you going to do with your art, right? But that day her question was a bit different. She's like, when are you going to get your daughter to go into art, right? And then he looks at me and he says, so what do you want to do? Do you want to do arts? And I was like, I didn't understand what that meant. Then he says, if I were to give you X number of artworks, you want to go and try and do an exhibition, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my first thought was like, yes, can make money. Right? I mean, that was my first thing about selling art, right? But so when he sort of passed me his artworks, one thing I realized was that what he was showing me and what I liked at that point in time were different. So then I went back to him and told him, Dad, could I go and look for my own artists? I would take what you have, your collection, but I want to look for artists which are a bit more current and contemporary at that point,
What was different?
A lot of his works were a bit more modern, right? So for example, things like you've got landscapes, portraits and things like that. Whereas for me, I was like, I think growing up in a more pop culture, contemporary culture. So then he says, where are you going to find artists? Okay. So at that time, I said, I think I can go to, there was a space called Central Market, and they had the Arts for Grabs. Right, long time back, right? And so Arts for Grabs, and I said I would go there and find artists. So I literally went there, looked around, found a few artists, and I think that's where A Jenin started as well. And that's how I met A Jenin Jacksta. I literally went up to him and says, I'm organizing an art exhibition. I like your work. Would you want to exhibit, right? And he was like, okay, and so I did that. I went to Malacca. There was a cafe at that time. Slips my mind. I can't quite remember what the name of the cafe is. Walked into the cafe and realized that there were art all around the walls. Went up to the barista and says, who are these artists? I'm organizing an exhibition. That's what I did. And I ended up organizing my first exhibition with a friend of mine, and it was called At First Glance. At first glance, right? Because at that time, that was how I was looking at art. I tengok, I suka tak? right? It wasn't.
You didn't think about the concept or everything,
No,
no?
because I just started, so I think I suka tak. So with my friend and I, she wasn't in the arts as well. We called it At First Glance, and we said, so it was an exhibition that had my dad's collection as well as newer artists. Put everything together, right? And then we did I did my first exhibition at White Box Publica. At that time it's White Box, now it's a restaurant.
So at that time you were just adventure. I mean, comparing to now, everything is online. You can just DM anyone. So during your time, you just went out and looked for any artist that you...
Yeah, I think it still happens now, right? I make it a point to go for events, right? Art events and any type of events, because you will find different artists or different creatives, you know. You are right, now with Instagram it's a lot easier. I do meet a lot of artists via DMs, right? But last time, you literally had to find the events. Okay, just make sure you go, you know. So it's faster and more efficient now, right? But the only thing that I think you do miss is when you meet someone in person, it's sometimes quite different, because you end up talking to them, and then, you know, you go beyond just what you see, right? Because sometimes you might say, oh, I like that artwork, but then you talk to the artist and you're like, oh, this artist has got concepts and things to say, you know, which is another area, which is another part which I think is important.
So during your first ever show, what was your thought process? I mean, like, probably right now you know, like, oh, I want to have this concept, I want to show this. So take back when your first show, what was your what were you trying to show? It's like, this is what I like, I want to show it.
As in At First Glance, Okay. So that one was interesting because my friend and I, we looked at it as an event, right? We didn't look at it as an exhibition per se, right? Because again, we were not part of the industry at the point in time, you know. So my dad was also helping oversee. He says, do a list of things that you need to do, right? So at the top of our list was F&B, right? Second point on the list was book DJ. Book DJ. And then after that, you know, then only came the like, okay, how to hang, things like that. I gave my...
The party is the priority.
Yes, you see, so I gave my dad the list and I think he nearly fell off the chair. Right? And he's like, who's going to help you hang your works? How many works do you need? You know, who's going to curate? Then how are you going to hang? We were just sitting there going, oh, okay, right? So I think that first exhibition started based on what he had given and you're right, it was which artist that I liked at that point that I saw, right? I put it all together. There was no concept, right? The concept, or it was a general theme of At First Glance, you know. And then so we put everything together. We had the DJ, we had the F&B, you know, and it was very Maria, because we that was how we organized that event, for it to be more of a get together, everyone come, you know. But I think it was interesting as well because in that kind of environment, people are also a bit more open towards the art. And then if our objective was sales at that point in time, we managed to sell a bit as well.
What changed when masa you pertama kali buat, it was for sale? And during all of your exhibition, what changed and how did that change happen from sale to wanting to showcase something?
I think after that, so with that exhibition, I then met quite a number of artists. So people like A Jenin, you know, some of the I think at that point there was two artists from Findas, which is Tae Bengzi, Lim K Soon, right? We started working with them. And also for that show, I mean, there were the artists, and it was interesting because for that show, there were also quite a number of interviews that we had to do, right? And I remember one with The Edge, right? The Edge, the reporter Elaine, who now runs the bookshop Lit Books. Lit Books. Elaine was basically a reporter with The Edge, right? And she came with a whole, like, you know, she's interviewing us, a whole bunch of questions on, you know, to an extent, why are you doing this? What inspired you? Concept and things like that. And I remember just sitting there going, okay, you know, there's a lot more to an art exhibition and art than just taking work, putting it up on the wall and selling.
All the things that you never considered before.
Yeah, because I wasn't as exposed to it, right? So then, so I think, and then also talking to people like the artists at that point in time, what their thought or ideas were from an artwork. So that's where I started then questioning myself. That is at first glance, but what if you took a second, third, fourth glance? What's beyond that? And at that time, my dad also started up a gallery called Interpret, and I had the opportunity to then use that space for a few more shows. Right, so I would then reach out to other artists or people to work with, and with each one, everyone taught you something or a different way to look and think about artwork, So then I think that's where the concept started coming in, right? And I think one of my favorite parts about it is the relationships which you start having and building, because as long as I work with you, we are going to exchange something, right? Whether it's the thought, whether it's point of views, emotions. And so when you work with people to develop an artwork or an exhibition, I think that's what I started enjoying more and more. The process of making it, right? Yeah.
I mean, interesting. It's like one of your interviews where you said that the artwork or the exhibition comes second. What you prioritize is your relationship building with the artist.
The relationship, because you see, to do an artwork, it's going to be a process, right? So with any exhibitions or art or artists that I work with, ideally which doesn't happen all the time because sometimes we don't have time, right? Is that we are able to talk and debate about the artwork. Right, the artist says, "Oh, okay, I've got this concept about consent, for example, the exhibition we're sitting in now," and then I will come back with a few questions. "Oh, but why are you looking at it like this? Did you think about this?" And then they will come back and say, "Oh no, it's because I was referring to something." So then that conversation opens up different thoughts for the artist as well as for myself, right? And then as we go on, and then finally we will have to land on something, because I always say got deadline lah, right? Because if we could have that conversation, we would talk, but then I will suddenly have to turn into what I call production mode and say, okay, we've got a month, so please land, because we need the artwork to come into the gallery space by a certain date, And after all that, I would say the process of it. So the process of it is like, to me, we are writing a sentence together. At the end of the sentence, the full stop is artwork, right? But it doesn't stop there, because then we might write a next chapter, right? Or a next paragraph.
Oh wow!
Yeah, then it continues. Yeah,
it's like a never-ending process.
It's a growing, learning process. Yeah, that's why it's never ending. Yeah.
So how did you find Temu?
So Temu, actually this space, in the past it used to be the print room, right? The print room was more a photography space and studio. Okay? So this space, right, is actually owned by Lilian Tay, the architect. And after the print room, then I think we hit pandemic, right? We hit the pandemic, and then basically, I have a friend, Lina Tan of Red Communications, right? She found this, she knows Lilian, and then she found this space, came in and saw the potential of it, and then sort of worked on it through the pandemic. So cleaned it up, cleaned up the garden, sort of, did up the roof and sort of, So when the pandemic, as we were towards the end of the pandemic, of course we had a few lockdowns, right? In one of those opening of the pandemic, she messaged me. She says, come and look at the space. There are a lot of walls, right? And she says, would you want to do something about the arts here, right? So of course I came, and it's a beautiful space, right? People who walk in just go, okay, there's high ceilings, it's very inviting, it's got the home feel, right? So then I said, yeah, I think it's something we can do together, right? So then I started doing the visual arts programming for this space. And yes, we do have other events here, like F&B events, community events, because I think what we would like to do with this space is to what I would say exchange audiences. So that means we don't only have an art audience coming in, but if someone comes here for a dining event or a community event, then they will also see art on the walls, right? Yeah, so I think that's the concept of this space, and how I sort of was invited in by a friend in that sense. Yeah.
I like Temu House because it's not exclusively for arts. Yeah, that's why I think that is one of Temu advantage lah.
yeah. I mean, I think like someone just called it a project space, right? So I call it an art space because to sort of differentiate from the galleries that we have out there, right? So art space, project space, and I think that's why we call it Temu, meeting space. Because I think it's important for people to meet, because from the meeting and the talking comes the collaboration that we can do. Yeah, because if we don't talk, everyone just does their own thing, which, then we won't have as many sparks for ideas. And
so what is the usual process when you are making an exhibition?
there are a few types of exhibitions. So I think with Temu, right, we are open to, I would say, artists, galleries, or people coming here and sort of wanting to use the space, right? So there's some exhibitions where we rent out the space, right? So that's quite a straightforward arrangement. But some of the exhibitions, like when say I meet you and then we talk and like, oh wow, that's a great concept for an exhibition, let's do it together, right? Then we either sort of look at the concept, write it up together, make sure that it's solid and researched enough so that then we can then approach the artist. And then we sort of look at the artist or says, would you be interested in this? Yeah, we invite them for a conversation. We don't just say, hey, here's the brief, is this something you'd be interested in, right? And then we sort of, ideally for me, an exhibition takes about 6 to 9 months.
6 to 9 months.
Yeah, because it takes time for the artist to do the work. Then I think again we need to put in that process of sort of questioning each other, right? Debating the work. Again, it doesn't always happen. A deadline happens, right? Yeah, and then after that, once the works come in, we actually also always invite the artist to come in and sort of curate it with us, right? So for example, like this area here, it's the artist is Nadia Nizamuddin. When she brings her work here, I said, okay, if we hang your interactive work here, it communicates with the other interactive work there, what do you think of it? How do you want to place it? Should it be a straight hang? Should it be a four square hang, right? Yeah, so that's the general process.
So usually the artist is gonna have that artist ego lah. So do you always follow the artist or follow your own intuition?
Wow, that's a very direct question. Because I think that word ego, right, isn't often brought up in the art scene, right? Interesting question, because I would say that it's not only an artist's ego, there is also a curator ego. There is also all of us have it, right? All of us have it. It's a tough question to answer because do I always follow the artist or not, right?
But you try to search for the middle ground.
I think I'm one of those that searches for the middle ground. Not rightly so, right? Because sometimes when an artist says, okay, this is my concept, and I was like, something not quite right, or I don't agree. So I will put in a few questions, and then they come back with answers. Like I would say, the problem is sometimes maybe I'm a bit too efficient, right? So because oh my god, the timeline is coming. Okay, let's just get it out, right? That's why I say ideally for each show we have a bit more time to debate, but then if to debate will take time, and then we are also a bit worried is how you were terasa, and then if you come back, how I were terasa. Because and then I have to ask myself, if I'm going to give you feedback, can I take the feedback from you about my curation, about my work? Is it as good, right? So it's something I've started to have to also think about and learn, right? That's why I always tell people, feedback to each other. talk to each other, communicate to each other, right? It's not always about, hey, great show. Hey, amazing show.
Yeah.
Hey, that's nice. I'm like, that's not going to help all of us, lah. Right? What is it? So if someone tells me, oh, it's a great show, what is it that's great? Right? Which part do you like? Which part do you not like? And then, of course, my ego come in, lah. Oh, why not? But it's human nature, and it's something we have to learn, right? Which I'm still learning. I'll admit it. I've actually never said any of this. Right? Yeah.
Based on what I've read, you also do like quote unquote taboo topic. And and that article I read, you even consulted lawyers, everything. So first, why do you want to showcase those kind of topics first?
I think when you say taboo, you have to ask yourself, taboo in what sense, right? So for example, I would use the word identity lah. Right, so just say if taboo is identity, yes, it's taboo in a certain area, right? So for example, in our country, right, maybe with a certain cultural, background, right? So then yes, it's taboo. But globally, right, or what's happening everywhere, it's just becoming a lot more open and inclusive in that sense, right? So where is it taboo? Right, so and then are we saying that it does not exist in Malaysia? Right, because if you're saying it doesn't exist, basically I'm just saying, okay, identity, and whoever has this identity, come and exhibit. Are you an artist with this identity? Come and exhibit. I don't see it as taboo, but I'm seeing it as a area or a topic, right, which a certain set of artists can come and express. Right, so it's not like I look at it and I, oh my god, taboo, I want to do it because we have to talk about it, right? But it's because it is there, right? It is there. We can't say it does not exist, Yeah, so I think it's not about looking at taboo topics, but it's about how else are we letting artists or people express themselves.
It's more about showing the idea.
Yeah, to talk, to have conversations about certain areas. Of course, because I know it's sensitive, then yes, we will do our sort of homework and research on, for instance, what are the kind of areas or that are parts that we might get into trouble, right? Or people can sort of come after and say, oh, this exhibition not quite right. And then of course we will do the precautions for that. Yeah, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be caught out and saying, oh, I didn't think about it. Oh, I didn't, because I think the best thing is to be prepared. So that's how we look at the sensitive type of exhibitions.
I mean, like, especially art exhibition, art is more subjective. So, like, how people interpret it, you can't control. So, how do you, manage those expectations? I mean, you can look here, you have panties here, and people will oh, this is very vulgar, and will you just accept it, or will you try to explain it?
It depends on the artwork as well. So for example, if you see the panties at the back, right, it's more of a positive artwork, right? Because and we will mention that in the statement, right? The statement is there. Okay, but if there are works which are not so positive, right? So for example, again, I am this identity and it's put out right there, and then it's actually talking to the artist and saying, how much do you want to say, right? Is it safe for you to say? Is there another way we can say it? Is there another way we can more subjectively say it? Right? So that even between the artwork and the text, it's subjective, right? So I think a lot of this has to be done with the artist. That means the artist would have had to think through, if I'm going to put out this artwork, if I'm going to put out this statement, how will this fit in the context of our country? And if we were questioned, so you just have to sit there and say, okay, if someone asks you this and question, is this sensitive? Is this right? You just need to be ready with the questions, right? Yeah. So again, a lot of this just takes pre-thought, pre-planning. Yeah.
So that's why the process that happens, you questioning the artist.
Yes. I think that's important.
I think I also remember my conversation with a writer, Fahmi Mustafa. He said that when you are writing something, if you want to use a sensitive word, first you have to think why are you using that word. Second, is it replaceable? So it's kind of like the same process with visual arts.
Yeah, because sometimes you talk to artists, say, what is your intention? Yeah. Is your intention to get into trouble? Do you want the experience to get into trouble? If so, then okay, but then I have to be aware of where is this, like myself, as well as the space that we're working in, right? Because then we might have to put a statement that says, opinions are of the artist and not of the space, right? But of course, but it's, again, with the artist, it says, if you want to get into trouble and we don't, is that alright with you? Right? Because again, you
have to draw the line.
Not draw the line, but we have to agree. We don't want to just throw it under the bus and say, okay, that's your pasal. We have to agree. So, or are we aligned that we're not comfortable with this? So let's change the text, right? Because you're right. The art, maybe we can talk through it because it's subjective. Sometimes what might get us into trouble is the text, right? Yeah. Or there have been artworks where I think with our country, especially when it comes to things like identity and religion, it's quite sensitive lah. Yeah.
So talking about sensitive topic, I want to know in a lighter tone. You work in media, right?
I used to. Yeah.
You used to. So. Because this is what I've always heard when doing this podcast, is that I'm making niche content and the general audience don't want to know about it. So tell me experience in you managing the niche content as well as trying to produce content for the mass audience. Where is it true? First, is it true? From your observation,
Okay, I'm going to break your heart. Yes. Yeah. So I think if in media is a business, right? And business, I would say comes from, or positive business comes from audiences and mass audiences, right? So because I think doing content that appeals to more people is of course a lot more sellable, marketable, things like that, right? Niche content is tough. It's tough, right? And I think the other thing because our country doesn't support, the infrastructure is not there to support content, whether it's niche. So for example, if you wanted to do something about visual arts, right? In other countries, you might be able to get a grant that says you can do, I'm going to commission, 12 episodes of a certain, of visual arts content, right? But here we don't have that infrastructure. Right? Or we had, but maybe very few. Yeah, so I think to commercialize niche content, it's actually very tough. Very tough. Yeah, because most of the media would look at mass content because that's what contributes to the business. Fairly so lah.
So, during creating exhibition, do you always focus on your core audience only lah?
No. So, you see, the thing about Temu is, our core audience is not only the visual arts. That's why I say it's about opening up audiences so that we get more people circulating in the space. I would say we don't look at an exhibition and say, okay, with this exhibition, I'm going to go after one core audience, right? I would say, okay, we've got the art audience, but we also have, for example, because like Consent, we've got quite a number of textile works, right? So are there people out there who are interested in textiles? The craft of textile, for example, would that be another audience? For this whole month, we've got quite a number of events as well. So will the events then pull in different audiences? Yeah, because I think the art audience is very well. I would say they've got enough exhibitions now. I think the Malaysian
saturated. It's pretty saturated.
It's saturated. The Malaysian visual art scene is actually very exciting now. We've got a show every week or every other week, right? Sometimes you look at your calendar, it's like, oh, 1 opening, 2 opening, which one can I make, right? But I think it's how else do we get other audiences to start coming? Yeah, which is not the easiest, it's not the easiest. But yeah, I think with Temu, that's what we're trying to do.
So rather than just focusing on one group, you try to show other group. This is here.
Yeah, correct.
Do you consider trying to? Have you ever had that idea of making it into the mass audience?
I think when you say mass audience, I mean, we do have. So if I had to think about a mass audience in the arts, right? I do think we have things like Art Expo, right? I think Art Expo is a good example of being mass, right? I think they used to have it at Mitec. Yeah, so that is a mass because a lot of galleries, a lot of art, and in fact, how do you make it a family event? People go and all that, right? I think that kind of events do take quite a lot of resources, whether it's people, whether it's investment and things like that, right? For me, currently, I don't see myself running that kind of events, right? Because sometimes I look at those kind of events, it could be, the job there would be more logistical. Right? How do you get, 80 to 100 galleries in a certain space, dividing the space and things like that, versus, I would say, just curating a show, right? Where you work with artists and things like that, right? So if you ask me that question now, I would say not at this point.
Interesting juga lah, because if you make a bigger show, it wouldn't be as personal as the smaller show.
I mean, having said that, I've done quite big shows because how I used to work before Temu was I would find opportunities to have shows where the audience are already there. So, for example, I've worked with Kaki Seni, right? When they used to have the Kaki Seni festival, and then they had it in Pavilion, right? So in Pavilion, they had the concourse. Then they would do a theatre music show, and then we would do art within the mall. Right, but to do something like that is actually quite crazy because you could only set up 10 p.m. onwards. Right, so I used to go in at 10 p.m. set up, be done by 5 a.m. Go back, have a quick shower, nap, and then go to work. So after a while, I'm like, oh my god, right? That was one. The other one that I used to do was also with Urbanscapes. Right, yeah, Urbanscapes. I think I did maybe about 3 with them. Right, and that was again before pandemic, and same thing, we had to set up at night, and then by the time you get back, so those were quite satisfying because the audience was there. People who came for Urbanscapes who were in Pavilion, you see them passing the art, going, "What is this?" Right, or so I guess to answer your question, yes, I have done it. I have done it for the mass. Yeah, I wouldn't rule it out lah. I would not rule it out, right?
Probably last one. Tell us your experience working at Temu and how it is different from your other experience working.
I think one of the best things about Temu is about 10 or 15 minutes from my house. Right? Because like I say, when I used to have to go to KL and then work until quite late. How is it different? I think at the end of the day, maybe the space is a lot more easy and comfortable for me. Good and bad, right? Because then I've also had to start asking myself, am I too comfortable? Is there other projects out there or other spaces out there that I could work with or work on, right? Yeah, because, apart from just working with this space, every space that you work in as well will give you a different dynamic, a different way of looking, a different way of seeing. So you have to start thinking differently, right? Yeah. So it's been great. Temu's been great, and and it's been going on, right? Like I say, we've actually done quite a bit of the programming for this year already. But yeah, I think it's also having to ask myself as well as I've got Kim sitting over there who works with me now, right? What else can we be doing, or where else can we be doing? Different places, spaces, people.
So you are venturing, trying to find difference in every space, or different in every method that you're trying to do.
Yeah, because I think in the arts, I always say we need to constantly flip-flop. Right, because you flip and then you're quite comfortable. After a while, you gotta go, okay, I need to flop. Right, because then you sort of get exposed to new things, meet new people, think differently.
So seeing dah 45 minit, probably the last one. Assuming that I am a up and coming artist, independent, what is the right method for me to approach Temu?
I don't think it's only with Temu. I think it's with any space, right? I think first of all, the artist would have to know, or at that point, as best as they know, what they're about, right? So that means they need to have a bit of a portfolio, right? To say that these are my works, these are the current themes, or that's what I'm exploring and I'm interested in doing, right? So that has to be there, and maybe to an extent ready, right? Nowadays it's called Instagram, right? So I meet an artist, they're like, have you seen my Instagram? I immediately get onto their Instagram because you can already tell, one, what kind of works they do, and to an extent how they even present it, right? You read a bit of their captions and they're like, okay, you know what they're doing and things like that. So I think that the artist again has to be ready. And then wherever they are, whether it's Temu or a gallery or meeting another artist or a curator or a gallerist, right? Is to actually go out there and to an extent meet as many people and network.
Even though many artists are like introverted and like that.
Actually, I don't know. I know a lot of artists who are actually quite extroverted. Yeah, but it's to go out there. It's to go out there and learn and be open, right? Also take opportunities. Don't be afraid to ask, right? You ask, you might get a no, right? But then you would have maybe like, a gallerist or someone who would have said, oh yeah, I've met you before. Weren't you the one that asked me for, So as long as you go there and, like you say plant the seed Hey, I'm here, right? Yeah, so I think it's a lot about going around and planting seeds Yeah, and then eventually something might stick or grow.
Talking about going to event, I like one. It's like someone once advised me to go to event rather than just focusing on online networking, because like you said, going to events, talking to the person in front is totally different rather than online.
It's very different. I think we had to go online because of the pandemic, right? But as soon as it opened up, people ran out of their houses, right? That's why there's so many events now, and people are just going out there because it's just different.
So yeah, probably gonna end this episode. So Sharmin, any last words?
No, thanks for interviewing me. And I do hope that with JeninBercerita you go out there and talk to a lot more people, and sort of, I see it as a documentation and capturing our visual art scene at a point in time, or the creative scene.
So yeah, again Sharmin, thank you for being our guest. And yeah, this is JeninBercerita. This is Pak Jenin. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe, like and share. And that's it. That is it. Bye bye.